And we are live on Behind the Markets. Little bit at a different time, but it is a holiday. I mean, we wanted to give everyone a break from the early morning wake up calls. Good morning to you, Vernon, and good morning to you, my brother. How are you doing on this gracious International Women's Day?
Mm.
Or did you not catch me? I said, how are you doing on International Women's Day, Vernon?
We are going to be having a lot of, sessions today at Prisma Hotel. We have something planned out for the women and just to celebrate and just appreciate them. And there's been these talks of inclusion and having more space for women. So I think this is one of those ventures that we want to, give women a platform to be able to express and just as well as join in the workforce as well as much as they can. I think the field is open, and if they're ready to join and just take up some of these other roles and spaces, I think personally I am okay with that.
So let's today we're going to discuss three things, Vernon. Actually four. We're going to talk one about obviously the market roundup, and then we're going to go through what has the last 10 years looked like in terms of progress. Because I think for a long time we tend to always look at these things on a year by year basis because that is the year we make progress. But we always have to take a look 10 years ago. What did Zambia look like 10 years ago? And there is a metric called the gender gap ratio, the gap report that is done by the World Economic Forum. I'm going to specifically hone in on the economic section, economic opportunities. And the headline for that today, Vernon, is that Zambia is the 10th most economically equal nation around the world, according to the World Economic Forum, out of 146 countries, and we're number five in Africa. Okay. And mind you, we were 89th 10 years ago. So that actually has been a huge change. And I'm going to go through the data that perceives to that. Then I'm going to talk about women in entrepreneurship. What has that meant? What has women in entrepreneurship look like? And also, what does the future look like? Where are the differentials coming between men and women? And also, what is the progress and what does society look like? Are they is there going to be a change? Because this is what Zambia has done in the last 10 to 20 years in terms of women's economic progress has been short of a miracle, but has also happened at a very rapid pace. And what has that done with society? What does that look like? What are the new dynamics? These are things that we have to start navigating as a group of people. Now, does that mean we should be scared of it? No, it just means we need to figure out how we can go around it or figure out how we can build society around the new dynamics of it. Because as I said, there are some new dynamics that have come into play. So, Vernon, let's start to take a first look at market data first before we get into it. We have seen market information. Now, for those of you who have seen earnings results coming out of the stock market, we will be going through those mostly tomorrow. But we did get earnings results for Zanaco. We did get earnings results for Standard Chartered. We did get earnings. We did get trading statements for African Explosive, CEC. We got earnings results as well. So we are getting quite a number of we're getting a real rush of earnings, and probably by the end of this week or next week, at least half of the companies should have reported, and then we'll be able to give you the earnings scorecard as to see what everything's looking like. But however, we are seeing a lot of revenue growth. Across the board for many companies, many of the listed companies, we are seeing revenue growth. EPS is not as fast growth as it was 2021. 2020 versus 2021. So we're not seeing as rapid in terms of EPS, in terms of earnings per share growth and profit growth, but we are seeing strong, resilient top line growth. Now, some companies have registered seriously powerful growth, but then we'll be looking at everyone else as well. But remember that 2022 was a little bit more of a difficult year for companies because they were battling with high costs that were coming in, and they were also battling with persistent inflation. And then towards the end, the exchange rate got a bit dicey on them, and those who are not doing exports unfortunately got caught on the wrong end of that. So we are going to be looking at earnings and how that's impacted and what signals, but we are still seeing medium-term growth prospects because a lot of our listed companies are registering stronger growth than expected given the circumstances. So in other words, our top companies, our mining sector trade is starting to rebound, while simultaneously our banking sector is doing well. So these three areas are showing that Zambia, at its core, is actually prime for quite a strong bounce back if it can get through the debt negotiations. Those are the data points that you should look at. Remember, Vernon, I stressed yesterday, focus on the signal, people. The noise is always going to be there, and it's there to distract you. Signal is what is the consistent message. What direction are things moving in? That's what you need to focus on. Talking about this event and blabbering about it, that doesn't make any difference. Other piece of big news that came out yesterday, Vernon, was I think Minister Milupi confirmed NAPSA's participation in the in the Dollar Osaka dual carriageway. Now, I think there's been a lot of hullabaloo. Sorry about that. You're saying?
No, I was just agreeing to the announcement of the Lusaka and Dollar dual carriageway.
Yes. So following his announcement, here's what we need to all focus on. It does here say that it does point out that yes, NAPSA is participating in the dual carriageway. But I think what everyone needs to pay attention to very quickly and not just bloat into reactions is NAPSA already participates in infrastructure projects. In fact, if you look at NAPSA's balance sheet, it says 4.5 billion kwacha as of December 2022 in infrastructure assets. Okay, meaning that is the new way that people are financing. Let me give you let me give you a conversation that happened quite a while back, Brendan. 2016, we're at a meeting brought together by the Securities and Exchange Commission, where the Lord Mayor of London was having a business conference with the financial sector of Zambia, because obviously the Lord Mayor is trying to look at the expansion of the financial sector of London. Now, remember, people, there's two Londons. There's London, the actual place, which is a political geography there, and then there's City of London, which is a business, people. That's a private city, and it's mainly representing the business interests and the financial sector, and it has a Lord Mayor who oversees it. Okay, because remember, the financial sector of England was very important. So the City of London actually came here, and their Lord Mayor was having a discussion with the Zambian financial sector, including the securities market, the banking sector, everything. Now, I remember a certain gentleman from Goldman Sachs. His name was Sergey, and he was in charge of Goldman Sachs Africa. And he said to us, he said, I would never invest in transportation companies in Zambia. It's like, I'll never invest in a railway company, but I would rather invest in the railway, because I'm guaranteed that people are going to use that railway rather than trying to get people to use a rail line. And he said, I don't want to get involved in the running and the management of it. He said that was where the global market was looking at. This was in 2016. And that woke Zambia up to the fact that if we want development money, we're going to have to start offering infrastructure financing. But in order to be able to do that, we need to also start pivoting our local investment base, which is our pension funds and NAPSA. So number one, we've started to get NAPSA involved in infrastructure financing. We tried, I think, and if I'm correct before, there was this thing called the Ulendo Bond, which ran to try and get as many pension funds into infrastructure financing back in 2016 to 2017. However, that thing didn't run properly and it ended up being a bust. So a lot of pension funds are not comfortable with the current models of infrastructure. But what this does, whenever you now have these pools and these consortiums where there's direct access to the actual, whether it's tolling booths or taxes at the airport or whatever it is, it gives pension funds the ability to now start financing infrastructure. You do have about 12 billion to 15 billion kwacha sitting in pension funds. Okay, just a quarter of what's sitting in NAPSA. So if you can get your NAPSA, your pension funds, your workers' compensation together, that becomes the financing base for a lot of this. That takes pressure off the central government and starts to allow the retirements and benefits money of this country to build this nation. So that's part of it. And I know people don't like having that conversation, but the reality is NAPSA is already participating in the road sector. They're participating in the infrastructure sector, and it's a way of diversifying. Now, if the figures are correct according to what was circulating, we're looking at about probably $300 million worth of financing. Well, if they are, and if it's not 300, please, I stand to be corrected. And I think we're just still looking for trying to get that correct. But even if that would basically move its position to about 10 billion in infrastructure. Okay, and that's still not much out of its 68 billion kwacha portfolio. And the purpose is to try and diversify. NAPSA is trying to make sure it diversifies so that it has various income streams to be able to pay pensioners and to raise its profile. That is the main thing that it's running for. It is a social security scheme because we know, Vernon, we know the Zambian people would not save for their retirement given the choice. We know this, okay? Or they'll take exaggerated risks to take care of their retirement. So NAPSA serves the purpose to try and cover for what we know we're going to do. You know how I know this, Vernon? There are more people getting scammed by half of these swindle groups than there are people actually investing in unit trusts and stocks, bonds, and those things. There are more people getting scammed. It's good to see that people are now starting to transition into legitimate assets thanks to educating them. But I think what we need to start doing is making sure that people are now more aware of their proper investment options. And what we'd probably find if more people did this is that NAPSA wouldn't have a place to exist if we were more educated and more investment savvy in what we did with our retirement money and plan for retirement. But the reality, Vernon, is that you're dealing with a country also who has never really had to deal with retirement as a question. Okay, we didn't have to deal with retirement as a question. We're only starting to battle with it now, simply because Zambians are now living beyond 65 and are scheduled to now get up to 75 by the end of the next 30 years. So there is a transformation that Zambians will be doing that, and Zambian women specifically will have to live until the age of 80 on average. The average Zambian woman is probably going to see about 79, 80 by the year 2050. So if you are below the age of 48 right now, which is the majority of Zambians, by the way, in fact, the majority of Zambian adults, 60% of Zambian adults are below the age of 40. So already when we're dealing with 48, we're dealing with somewhere around 70, 75%. If you're below the age of 48, you are already going to contend with having to live 20 years after your retirement. You need as many things supporting you in that time because you're not going to have the strength, nor are you going to have the motivation to do the same work that you were doing. Okay, so everybody has to make sure that they plan for their retirement, and NAPSA is one of the buckets. So, yes, is it participating in the infrastructure sector? Well, it's pretty normal. Okay, that's what people need to understand. It's pretty normal what the infrastructure sector is financed. Remember, I gave you that data yesterday. So now let's get into the rest of the data points for today in terms of the summary. Kwacha is still moving down by 5 ngwe. The dollar is still getting 5 ngwe more expensive every single day. It's on a trend now. Until something breaks it, this is full-blooded momentum, and it's going to continue. And as we said, we're heading towards 22 point. We're going to head towards 22. We're probably heading towards a June close of the dollar somewhere around the ranks of 24.73 by the time we get to July. Sorry, 24.73 if we do not break this trend. So to everybody who's watching, that is a number that you need to pay attention to in the deepest way. But the Kwacha did close yesterday at 20.1523 with 0.28% up. And year to date, the dollar is up 11.36%. We did see that the rand is down 1.0955, down 0.82%, because the rand is also suffering horribly. You see, what's also dragging the Kwacha down is the lack of capital coming through the South African markets and therefore affecting output there, therefore affecting currencies within Southern Africa. Unfortunately, South Africa is the controller of capital for Southern Africa, just like Kenya is the controller of capital for East Africa, Nigeria is the controller of capital for West Africa, and Egypt is the controller of capital for North Africa. It's just the ones that have really done well have taken the capital that they've received and they've managed to build things with it to make sure their country operates better, and they've inspired their people to be much more educated and much more sophisticated at operating their economies. That's where I think the huge change has come in. Now, so South Africa obviously being the huge controller of capital, therefore being the one of the reasons that we're also getting a drag down when it comes to when it comes to our currency. Yesterday, the bond markets did move about 0.12% up. Bond index up 5.5% year to date. We did see that the bond index in dollars is down 0.16%, down 5.26% year to date. So it's almost like a reflection of each other. which is quite painful, I think, for all of us to see. And we're seeing that the bond yields are up 0.41% year to date, down 0.001 yesterday, with 49-day streak upwards moving in terms of the GRZ bond index on the secondary market, while we're seeing USD bonds down for the second consecutive day, with only one day that broke the losing streak. Now, in terms of commodities, we have seen that copper went down by 1.98% yesterday, up to 8,700, lower than it's been over the last 2 months. So we are seeing a lot of the gains in copper being erased. A lot of the news, obviously, about hikes coming in, 83.27%, or sorry, 2.68% downwards in terms of oil prices, 83.27. We will give you our mid-month projection coming up in the next week in terms of what we see the pump price at. But we do see the pump price still moving in an upwards trajectory, solely because the FX rate is the key defining factor of what is happening to the pump price of oil. It's not really the global markets right now. It's our forex. Our exchange rate is really what's driving up your price of gas. And if the exchange rate still continues moving at 4%, expect your oil price to also continue moving at about 4-5% on a monthly basis until you see a huge break. But you're seeing oil finding a floor around $80. It's not breaking below. And as long as that's happening, your price of your currency is probably going to do most of the damage. Gold moved down by 1.96%, so you could see a commodity slash that happened yesterday. We saw yesterday that gold in Kwacha moved down about 1.69%. That means that gold in Kwacha is underperforming the dollar itself, so you're better off just holding dollars at the moment in your portfolio of risk of what we call wealth insurance assets. Bitcoin was up 0.18% in Kwacha, and Ethereum was up 0.3% in Kwacha, with 50.72% up Bitcoin year to date, and Ethereum up 46.08%. Your top performing wealth insurance assets above the stock market, which unfortunately is still down 1.5%. There was a horrible sell-off that happened yesterday in response to results. There were positive results, but there seems to be a lot of take profit that sold down quite a bit of the stock market. So 46% up in terms of Ethereum, 50.72% up in terms of Bitcoin, gold up 10.95%, 11.36% up the US dollar, bonds up 5.50% year to date, while stocks are down 1.51%. We're still in a defensive position on our market. So right now, it's still the same game. Buy up what you can, especially on the bond market. Hold some insurance assets, and then start to see how markets are going to position themselves for the especially after results season, and then start seeing what you can start picking up. But we are seeing a few positive results starting to come in. Go shopping a little bit and start positioning yourself properly. Now, looking into some of the major news items, especially when it comes to the latest news globally. We are seeing that Asian stocks slump as Powell flags higher interest rates. He did say that I am prepared to continue higher interest rates. And also China worries are starting to rise in terms of economic data. The dollar clears a 3-month high as Powell stamps down as well that he's going to say that he's going to raise interest rates. This is what wiped out a lot of the commodity sector yesterday. It is Chairman Powell who was actually Chairman Powell, who was giving his views on how he's going to continue in terms of interest rates. Bank of Japan yesterday did announce that it is likely to try, but by the end of the year, 2023, it is unlikely, and that's what is expected. It's unlikely to tweak the long-term yield control. In other words, where it sets the 10-year rates. It does show that even there was a study recently done that in terms of Women's Day, unfortunately, women's employment in Afghanistan since the Taliban took over has dropped by 25%. And what did we expect? Unfortunately, they have very stringent rules on just the existence and the operation of women in society. But yesterday, the main big news yesterday was Chairman Powell's reaction was Chairman Powell's statement that he is going to continue rate hikes. Let's take a look also at some of the data in terms of macroeconomic reads from yesterday. We did see that on Tuesday, South African forex reserves did come down slightly, pushing for weakness in the rand itself. Unemployment data in Switzerland did actually come down to 2.1%, meaning their economy is starting to pick up. Remember, Switzerland is one of our biggest buyers of copper for trading purposes, not really for them to utilize. It's not really doesn't matter to us. German factory orders were up 1% on a month-on-month basis versus 3.4% on the previous month. So we're seeing factory orders starting to slow down, while Chinese reserves were down to 3.1, came down to $3.133 trillion from $3.184 trillion of the previous month's read. GDP annualized in South Africa shows that it's actually coming down. So that's the weakness in the rand that's also being expressed, while quarter four quarter on quarter GDP data 1.3% fell in terms of quarter four, while year on year is 0.9%. So that's what we're starting to see. South Africa's economy did slow down to about 0.9% quarter four GDP growth versus 4.2% the previous month. We are seeing interest rates in 3-year interest rates in Britain starting to pick up to about 4.14%. Same thing with Spanish interest rates. 6 months interest rates went up from 2.6% to 3.14%, and 12-month interest rates went up from 2.8% to 3.2%, showing that interest rates are starting to pick up. British mortgage rates are also up above 7% as well. So we're seeing from 6.66% to 7.02% in terms of British mortgage rates, while retail sales in South Africa, in America, have come down. The US consumer is starting to slow down in their purchasing activity, down to 3%, while consumer confidence is still poor in countries like Mexico. Consumer confidence in general is still poor in countries like Mexico, about 44.8. That is the score that's coming out. API crude numbers also show other things that were supposed to push oil prices up, but Chairman Powell's push to raise interest rates was much stronger. So what are we seeing? What we're seeing on the global economy is that inflation is still sticky. It's no longer declining, it's sticky. So it's kind of gotten flat in a position where it is. Interest rates are starting to pick up with the expectation that you're going to have hawkish central banks. That's one of the main pieces that you're seeing there. While industrial activity is also starting to fit and started. There's good data and bad data in general when it comes to industrial activity, while simultaneously growth is starting to slow down around the world. Now, what data are we looking for today? It is International Women's Day, and we are looking for leading indicators that have come out of Japan, which are showing that there is still economic slowdown in Japan. We're looking for retail sales coming out of Germany today, out of Italy. We're looking for employment data that's also coming out of the European Union to see how the global economy is growing, with mortgage data also expected to come out of America. We're looking for the MBA 30-year mortgage rate. That will show us also how interest rates are moving. The jobs market in America with crude data. And at the end of the day, we shall be looking for inflation data coming out of China. Month-on-month inflation data is expected to drop. Year-on-year inflation data is expected to drop. And PPIs, which are more important to the Zambians because we import, are expected to drop. While we'll be waiting for Japanese GDP data for quarter four just to be confirmed, the finalized version of Japanese GDP data to be finalized. That is the most important information that we've seen coming out of the major parts of the market. Now, today, one of the major conversations which we're having today is got to do with International Women's Day. And I said I'm going to break down a few trends regarding International Women's Day. Unfortunately, I've lost Vernon for the moment, and hopefully we'll get him back at some point. But International Women's Day, the International Women's Day data does show that Zambian women have actually made quite a lot of strides, especially over the last 10 years. And I'll be reading some of the trends over the last 10 years of where do Zambian women stand in terms of certain economic. Now, I'm going to really focus on the word economic because not everywhere do we stand well, and some of those things are explainable. But this is a metric called the this is a page out of the Global Gender Gap Index for 2022 from the World Economic Forum, and this is Zambia's page. And Zambia's page, as you can see, this first part, I'll zoom into this first part here on the side. This is what we call the general outlook. And you can see these are scores out of 1. You can see Zambia is doing particularly well when it comes to health and survival. Obviously, our women are getting much more health care, but we're looking at also their life expectancy. It is growing faster than male life expectancy, and that's why the gender life expectancy gap is actually getting wider and wider. One of the reasons I, as a financial advisor, have constantly said to women, especially those who are married or seeking to get married, that you must take retirement very seriously, because you are expected to outlive your husband by 8 years, or whoever you're married to by 8 years at least. Okay, you are expected to get up to 78 to 79 years of age, or probably heading closer to 80 by the year 2050. And that means that you are probably going to have to contend with 8 years longer of life than his, 8 years longer of retirement. Now, most women marry men who are 5 years older than them. So at least 5 years older than them. And what is a result of that, of all of that happening, is that a woman will probably have to contend with about 15 years. So in terms of the work that you're doing, women have to be very conscious of their retirement, because they're probably going to have to face probably about 13 years, sorry, not 15, 13 years of being alone. That statistically is what you're facing with the current dynamics of life. But we are seeing that women are improving in terms of economic participation. Now, this summary table on the right does show that Zambia is ranked 62nd in terms of our global, our gender gap index, where we are. We're scoring 72.3%. We're scoring 72.6%. So we are down from the previous year, and our ranking has dropped by about 6 positions. In terms of the economic participation and opportunity, which is the economic equality metric, it does show that Zambia is scoring 80.3%, meaning we are 10th in the world. We're in the top 10 in the world and top 5 in terms of economically equal countries for women. Educational attainment, we're ranking 119th. Most countries have got much better education outcomes, and also because I think we're not scoring in terms of our secondary data. I'm sure if we start capturing that much better, we will probably start to see that women are outflanking men much better, especially this year's grade 12, grade 9 results, where we started to see the top 50 was about 80% girls. Okay, so that already tells you what the future is talking about in terms of better education outcomes. And also, women have caught up in terms of the college population of Zambia. And I'll show you that data just now. Health survival rates, Zambia is actually one of the top in the world in terms of health survival. But the place which is lagging and constantly lagging for Zambia is political engagement and political empowerment. That is mainly due to the fact that we've never had a woman head of state. They do rank things like, have you ever had a woman head of state? How many women do you have in ministerial positions? How many women do you have in parliament? Those are important data. Those are important data points that the world tries to track. How many women do you have in parliament? How many women do you have there? Now, I always say that when it comes to politics, it's really in the hands of women. I mean, you do have now you do make up the majority of the voter base, and all it really requires is women to just pull together and say, this is who we're voting for and this is who we're supporting. That will pretty much make the winning goal for that metric to get improved. So it's really just up to women to come together, especially during the elections, and back the women candidates. We are outnumbered as guys. That's the reality. And for a while now, we will be outnumbered. That's the reality. We don't live as long anyway, so we're always going to be outnumbered. So now, no, it's the truth. Guys don't live as long anyway, so they're going to be outnumbered anyway. So that is the first data point that I will give you. Now, going into some of the other metrics of how women have done, and diving a little bit deeper into how women have done, especially in the Economic Opportunities Index. Now, the Economic Participation and Opportunities Index basically outlines how women are holding in terms of certain metrics in society. How are they doing in terms of certain participation and certain metrics in society? And what we're seeing is that women are starting to hold more positions and holding better economic outcomes than they were 10 years ago. Last year was a little bit of a slip, but we are starting to see that over the last 10 years, they have improved drastically. Now, reading that data point to you, Vernon, of 80.3% in terms of where Zambian women stand, in terms of the Economic Participation Index, we were at 61.4% in 2012. We're at the same score where we were last year, and we were ranked 89th back then, but now we are ranked 110. Now we're ranked number 10, and we're 5th in Africa. Number one is Burundi. Number one is Burundi. Number 2 is Kenya. Number 3 is Botswana. And just wanted to get our numbers correct. Yeah, so number 2 is Kenya. Number 3 is Botswana, and just to round up the top 5, number 4 is Liberia, and number 5 is Zambia. So we are the 5th most economically equal country in Africa for women. However, it may not speak too much because we still have a high poverty rate, and it may just be equal poverty than it is equal success. So we need to try and make sure that as affluence grows, we still give as much equal opportunity to women in Zambia. And though we are seeing them dominating in areas like banking, especially the financial services world, we are starting to see them dominated in our fields such as the securities industry, in the regulation and administration. Women are dominating in positions. We have CEOs who are women of the stock exchange. We've got chairs who are women of the stock exchange, chairs who are women of the Securities and Exchange Commission, lead directors in the Securities and Exchange Commission who are women and have been for some time. The only problem I think we have is in terms of things like ownership of brokerage firms. We do have women dominating and leading our brokerage firms who are actually operating them, but we haven't got as much women ownership in the space of brokerage firms, unit trusts, on the entrepreneurial side of the securities market. But we have seen the rise of some who are becoming advisors. There are people in my field who are starting to come up, and they trust me when I say this. They are tough, Vernon. They are tough competitors. You don't
Uh,
ever sleep on those ones. They are tough. And I'm telling you this business of guys looking the other way, thinking women are catching up to them in business. They are tough competitors, people. Women don't sleep when they run businesses. I've seen those ones. Okay. When I look at a woman competing in business, I treat her the same as a guy. Me, I don't underestimate these ones. Otherwise, I'll end up like a David and Goliath situation. These ones are stronger than you think.
mm,
Now,
yeah.
so we are seeing in terms of economic ranking, we are there. So let's break down some of the actual data points that we have here. Labor force participation. Female labor force participation in 2012, Vernon, was 60%. Today, it's 69.2%, down a little bit from last year, where it was 71.3%. But parity score in terms of labor force participation versus guys, male labor force participation, Vernon, in 2012 was 79%. Do you know that male labor force participation in Zambia is down by 2 percentage points, while women's labor force participation has risen by 9%. So there's an opposing trend here. Men are exiting the labor force while women are entering the labor force. So that's a
Yeah.
change in society. You see what I mean? Those are serious changes in society. In fact, especially over the last 10 years, since we had the rise of cadarism and a lot of the worst behaviors, we actually did see a massive amount, almost 1 million men left the labor force over the last 10 years, especially young men. Men who weren't going for education, men who weren't sick, weren't tending to family duties, they just left the labor force. And now they went into illicit activities
Yeah.
effectively. So we have to try and fix that huge male exit that we experienced for the last 10 years. And that's probably a result of the fact. But in the light of that, women have actually filled the gap, and they've actually come in with a 9% increase in their labor force participation. So in terms of parity, it used to be 76% in terms of parity of women's labor force participation. In other words, the ratio of women's labor force participation to male labor force participation was 76%. Now we're at 89%. So that's where we're sitting now. And Zambia used to be ranked 71 in terms of the ratio of women in the labor force to men in the labor force. Now we are ranked 24th. So in the top 25 out of 146 nations around the world in terms of women's labor force participation. Let's take a look at wage similarity. We're ranked 21. At wage equality for similar work, we have still kept it around 75%. That is based on a survey. We're not really sure what metric to measure, because when we look at estimated earned income, you'll actually see where that stands. Now, in terms of wage similarity, wage equality for similar work, 75% is the score. The equality index, Zambia is ranked 24 and has been at that position since 2012. In terms of estimated earned income, women have gone on average from earning $1,200 in 2012 to $2,906 in 20 in 2022, versus men who are earning $970 in 2012 to $3,600 in 2022. So in this period, men have just under doubled their income, while women have almost tripled their income during this period. So women's income has grown 2.5 times, men's income less than 2 times. And as a result, the parity has grown from 64%, from women earning 64% of what men are earning, to women earning 82.3% of what men are earning. Unfortunately, that's down from last year when women were earning 97% of what men are earning. So there is a difference that has come down there. And we need to try and check which parts of the economy that has registered in. Now, legislators, senior officials, and managers in society, women have gone from 19, in terms of ranking of estimated earnings, Zambia has gone from ranking 50th. We were 5th in the world last year, and unfortunately, due to the drop, we've dropped 13. We were ranked 5th in the world. Now we were ranked 13. So we're in the top 5 in terms of estimated income parity. Now, we were the 5th best in terms of estimated income parity last year, but now we're the 13th. We're in the top 13, but we're still way above where we were 10 years ago in terms of ranking 50. Now, legislators and senior officials as managers, women were 19% of senior officials, legislators, and legislators, senior officials, and managers. Now they are 45.92%, which is the highest they've been. So that parity index has gone from 23% to 84%. I think this is the biggest change. We've gone from being ranked 87 to 21st. This is the biggest change for Zambia, because the movement in women into managerial roles of businesses has actually been at a huge rapid rate over the last 10 years, which has gone from 19% of roles being filled by women to 45% of management and senior official roles, senior officers and managers. So legislators, senior officers and managers, that used to be 19% filled by women. Now that's 45.92% filled by women. That's a drastic change. Okay, these are now women heading departments, women heading projects, women heading companies in full swing. That is where there's a huge change. Now, we look at also professionals and technical officers. What percentage of those are women? In 2012, it used to be 31% of professionals and technical officers, technical workers used to be women. Now we're looking at 41.8%. So we've gone from 46% parity to 71.8% parity. Now, that hasn't changed our rank, because a lot of the world has been shifting to try and get as many women into professional sectors of the economy. When you look at educational attainment, we haven't done as much. There's an 85% parity now. There's a 93.8% parity. Obviously, we've worked a lot on things like reducing child marriage and its prevalence. It hasn't reduced the rank. But where we've seen a big improvement when it comes to Zambian women is that we've seen about 1.4% of college enrollment. 1.4% of Zambian women were in college. Now it's 3.5% of Zambian adult women are enrolled in tertiary education, versus 3% of men in 2012, now up to 4.8% of men in 2022. So we have seen the parity figures go from 46% to 73%. So in other words, there is for every 10 men in college, now there's 7 women in college, versus the olden days where it used to be for every 10 men in college, there'd be about 4 to 5 women in college. So we're actually seeing these numbers improving much better, but it hasn't improved Zambia's ranking. So in terms of the economic activity, we are seeing Zambian women progressing at a very rapid rate, especially the amount of Zambian women who are sitting in managerial positions of workplaces. Now, when you also take a look at entrepreneurship data, and I'm going to be releasing a lot more data to look at the progress of women over the last 10 years, we have seen that the women of Zambia, in terms of the younger women, and I'm going to look at quickly here just to round this off, in terms of entrepreneurship data, you are seeing that entrepreneurship data is showing that entrepreneurship activity, especially amongst young Zambians, is running at a very rapid rate. But if you look at the pink part of it, which is 9,369 women employers, so we're counting the number of employers as entrepreneurs. The number of employers were about 9,300 in the 2017 labor force survey, but by the 2021 labor force survey, we're looking at 26,000. That's a tripling of the number of young women who are opting to go into entrepreneurship, run businesses and build them and create jobs for each other. So we're not just looking at self-employed women. We're looking at women who are actually creating jobs for fellow people. Why is this important? Well, it's important because women are more likely to give other women opportunities in management positions, and they're more likely to give more opportunities to women. It's the same thing when you're looking at trying to improve racial equality. You need to improve ownership of businesses. Because if you improve ownership, it will effectively improve racial equality. If you want youth participation in management, younger ownership. So if you have young women actually creating more businesses, that create jobs. Now, obviously, men have also grown at quite a rapid rate. The number of men, male youth businesses has gone from 21,511 to 21,511 to 58,609. So there has still been a strong growth, but you do have seen a tripling where you've seen 2.5 growth. It is par on par that you're starting to see women participating more in the business sector of the economy, starting businesses, growing them to a point where they can actually afford to hire people. Now, access to capital data, obviously, that's a different story in terms of women and women getting access to finance. Those are statistics that we'll see from Bank of Zambia, and we'll be running those out for the rest of the week to see how much that's improved or not improved over the period of time. Now, finally, I'll give my final thought also on the change of society. Now, whenever you have a rapid change like what Zambia has experienced over the last 10 years, you are seeing massive changes in the way society operates. One of the key indicators which I am looking at is family formation levels. And family formation is quite important. And I know people may think this may be an archaic conversation, but it is important because we've built societies on family and on the prevalence of family and how families operate. And what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a slowdown in family formation for opting for career. And that doesn't mean we work around it. People are getting married at much later ages. Well, the first thing I think we've seen with women is the eradication of child marriage. Not to the point where it's absolutely eradicated, but we are finally starting to fight it much stronger. So a lot of the younger women statistics where we saw women being married by age 25 was also because a lot of them were being taken as child brides. So at least we've managed to eradicate that and give them the opportunity to go to school, go to college, excel at those fields, finish the 12th grade, get a certificate, because once you get a certificate, you are 63% likely to be employed. That is an important metric that we need to track as a society. So if we can get our women to at least get certificates, diplomas, and then get to degrees, then we're actually seeing a lot more of them participating in the labor force much easier, and therefore getting their economic freedom. But obviously, society is changing a bit. And one, yes, that we are eradicating those ills that were holding women back from entering the labor force. There is unfortunately a flip side to it, where we're also seeing a lot of men opting not to even get into any relationship or get married at all. Now, that has an effect. It does have an adverse effect on things like crime levels. It does have an adverse effect on things like productivity levels. Male productivity is driven a lot by family formation. Family men save more, earn more, build assets more. So the lack of family formation might have a negative effect. Now, does that mean women should step out of the labor force? No, by no means does it mean that. It just means that we may need to re-articulate and think about how we build societies and build families to make sure that there is no penalty for the progress. We want to make sure that we have a penalty-free progress, that as we're having prosperous women, it's translating into prosperous homes and families, and it's actually allowing us to build for it. So what changes to our legislative code? What are we actually doing? Should we be looking at more finance data? And this is why. And I know I'm going to round up here. This is why I've been talking about churches, and I've been willing to actually come into the ring and support the churches in trying to make sure they take a data-driven approach to marriage counseling in the realm of the new dynamics, because things have changed drastically. Remember that we've gone from 19% of women being managers in managerial roles in businesses to now 45% of managerial roles being fulfilled by women. You are likely to be outranked by your wife, okay, at your workplace, or she's likely to hold a much more senior position. Women are out earning men in terms of the labor force, in terms of hourly wages. They're out earning men, and they're outperforming men at school. So grade 12, they're outperforming men at school, and they're out earning men in the formal sector. That changes a lot of family dynamics, and therefore people need to start trying to re-articulate themselves on what that means. What does that mean? How do we manage families? How do we interact with one another? These are the things that we have to try and look at. What is it that makes people comfortable to continue a growing population? Because one of Zambia's greatest assets is that we have a population that grows around 3% a year, which leads to a doubling of our population every 25 years. That's very healthy for a society, to double your population every 25 years. That's actually quite important, because that makes sure that you've got a labor force that can take care. If you can put them into work, you have a labor force that can then take care of your elderly. That requires family. because countries where there's slow wage growth, where there's slow population growth, are suffering from crippling amounts of debt because their governments have to now start financing social welfare programs because they've got a huge elderly population. That is why countries like China are trying to reverse course on their one-child policy, because they're trying to get as much family formation. But they too are also dealing with the fact that a lot of their women are feeling much more empowered economically and are opting to get married later and are opting to look for much better mates than settling for the ones that they were having before. So these are the changes in society that we have to try and see how we can navigate, also for the global implications that they'll have. So that is my roundup of it, that Zambian women have made a lot of progress in business. They've made a lot of progress in terms of work, massive amounts of progress over the last decades in terms of work. And what we just need to make sure that they should never be a social penalty for the progress, because life fulfillment happens in 6 areas. We can look at it in terms of work and money. Yes, they're earning more money. Yes, they're getting more work, but they need to be, yes, you have to be healthy in 6 areas of your life. You must be healthy in terms of your work. You must be healthy in terms of your money. You must be healthy in terms of your spirituality, in terms of your body, in terms of your family, and in terms of your mind. So family is one of the 6 puzzle pieces, and we just want to make sure that as we're increasing the health and fulfillment that's happening in the work, it's not coming at the cost of the options for family development. And nor are we, and I want to stress this point, nor are we saying that we must relegate women or put roadblocks, because that's what, unfortunately, countries like Afghanistan have opted to do, is to make sure that they just roll women back to the Stone Age in order to try and preserve their society. God knows what they're thinking and how they view things. But that's why they're acting the way they do, by banning women from going to college, banning women from working. They're trying to make it a male-dominated society by law, which is not right. Okay? Unfortunately, that is not right. So we just have to look at how to talk about it. But I think that can be cured by taking a data-driven approach to looking at the dynamics of what marriage looks like today, what family looks like today, and what we should be teaching people when going into family, and what expectations people should have based on the dynamics and mate selection, all sorts of things. That is part of it. And that's a big change because, like I said, women in the workforce in stronger levels in 10 years is a massive wave of change. And therefore, we must learn to understand what that means going forward and what does society look like. Because I will give you one metric. By the year 2050, it is expected that out of the men below the age of 29, men 25 to 29, 51% of them will be unmarried or have never been married by then. That's where the forecasts are going. But if you go back to 1996, it was only a quarter. So it will become more common that to have unmarried young men, and 34% of them will be unmarried young men. And why? What are the changes? There are changes to this. Women will also have gone through massive changes as well when it comes to marriage and family formation during that as well. So the two are changing. So in as much as, yes, we need to continue pushing the progress, but we also need to make sure that we manage how we are reacting to the process or acting upon the progress to ensure that we still have a healthy society while having an economically prosperous society that lifts a lot of women out of poverty because they have been struggling with these things, not having to put them on social welfare programs, but giving them skills and the ability to take care of themselves. Especially in a world where a lot of men are also dodging family duties. Because one of the other metrics that has been rising is men who are running away from children. And that's leaving a lot of women with the burden of childcare while trying to raise themselves economically. With that, I'd like to wish the women of Zambia a wonderful Women's Day and a congratulations for working as hard as you have, for making the strides that you have, for building financial systems like village banking that you have, and for participating in capital markets and investment markets that you have, and raising the savings profile of the country. The women of this country have actually done a lot in that, and they've done it silently over the last 10 years. They've made sure they've come together, they've worked together, they've supported one another. In fact, men can learn a lesson from that. They've supported one another and they've built on each other, and therefore they must be commended, especially for the kind of effort and progress that they've made. And a lot of this has been done without politics improving. It has been the women themselves in economics who have pushed themselves up by pushing themselves to go to school, pushing themselves to then go to college and operating in the business world and also operating in there. Yes, there are women's programs that have been available to them, but they've taken them and they've ran with them and they've built on them. For somebody to create a job, I don't care what support you've gotten, they've created jobs, people. That's what counts. And therefore, as I said, I'd like to wish the women of Zambia a wonderful Women's Day. Salute to all of you. God bless. And see you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.